Hello and welcome to the Switch for Good podcast. I'm Alexandra Paul and I'm here with my wonderful co-host Dotsie Bausch. Hi, Dotsie.
Hey, how are you?
I'm fine. I wanted to talk to you about this study that came out about vegan diet and performance.
Yes, I just received it this morning, actually. And it was a study done in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition. And they published a study that found little evidence that a vegan diet is hurting athletic performance.
How much money did they pay to get to that?
Oh, my goodness, I know. In fact, the study found that vegan athletes might have a slightly better endurance in some measures. So they did a strength test of 56 women, half of which followed vegan diets for at least 2 years and half of which were omnivores. And the researchers calculated that the endurance compared with maximal oxygen consumption, also known as VO2 max, was superior in the vegan athletes. And it was interesting because the reason that they gave that they think that this could be actually correct is that vegans eat more carbohydrates. And that was like the only conclusion that was made. While that is probably most definitely true, I would imagine.
It's part of the reason.
And a fuel, right? It's extremely important to get glycogen to your working muscles. There are a few more things that I just wanted to add on to that and just kind of help them along with the reasons behind a plant-based diet possibly being good for athletes. One is, and I think you're remiss to not bring this up, is better blood flow. Right? Because if we have better blood flow, we have more oxygen flowing to our working muscles. And a plant-based diet improves blood flow in a couple of ways. One way is by the foods that we eat and that are giving nitric oxide to our system. So those are foods like carrots and beetroot and all the dark leafy greens. And that blood flow is important to, obviously, our working muscles, but it's also important to our brain, our sexual organs, right? We have all of these blood pharmaceuticals that we take, like statins and Viagra, to get blood flow upstairs and downstairs, and maybe try some beetroot. Is just a little side note there.
Beetroot, they've actually done studies with beetroot, and it has improved the endurance. Also, it's other studies.
Yes, but we even saw in the Game Changers there was a scene where it showed the effect of just one single animal-based meal, right, on impeding blood flow, therefore impeding performance. But another reason is because of the anti-inflammatory effects of a plant-based diet. And plant-based diets are about 64 times the antioxidant content of animal-based diets. So that's huge. Antioxidants basically equal anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer, anti-aging. And for performance, a faster recovery, right, is going to create a faster you in the end, because you're going to be able to produce more work. And at the end of the day, if you can do that, you're going to be the better athlete. So I have had a few scientists tell me that antioxidants are literally like armor, right, for health and also performance. And then thirdly, plant-based diets are high in omega-3s. And those are alpha linoleic acid, and foods like flax seeds, ground flaxseed meal, hemp seeds, walnuts, chia seeds are really powerful sources of omega-3s, which help support the reduction of swelling and, again, inflammation. So I don't know, maybe we should just write in and just give them some other tidbits of what they might be able to conclude from finding out that indeed a vegan diet was helpful for the athletes. But I love that I got this morning, because it's such a fantastic segue into our guest, who I don't think he knows this, but I just he's just the OG, right? He's just the OG of vegan athletes. He and Robert Cheek. I'd say those two, right? It's like anytime I think about the trailblazers and the folks that were breaking barriers in nutrition far ahead of the rest of us, right? And really helping us unravel this ridiculous, myth that athletes are formed and are stronger and better based off of animal foods, is Brendan Brazier. And he is with us today, joining us from Vancouver. He is an extraordinary entrepreneur, as you mentioned earlier before we came on. A former professional Ironman and also author of 3 best-selling books. One the Thrive diet. And we have here, if you're watching on YouTube, the Thrive Energy Cookbook, because the Thrive book I loaned out a long time ago, and somebody's enjoying it. But I also appreciate Brendan so much because he is the person who makes me remember every single moment of every single day to have grace and compassion with those that don't want to flip overnight to a plant-based diet. And that's because I read the Thrive Diet way before I was vegan. Everything in it made complete and total sense to me. I mean, I just flipping through the page. Yep. Oh, that makes sense. And I am a professional athlete at this point, and I didn't change my diet. So whatever I was facing at the time, right? If I was just being obstinate and stupid, or whatever the reasons were, obviously now it's basically all that I do with my life. And so I remember back to, I read that book, and it was the most profound book to this day still to make that connection for folks. And I didn't change right in that moment. So we have to have understanding and grace and just be loving with people that say, I'm changing one meal a week or one meal a day or whatever it is, and just celebrate their journey, because that's what ended up kind of happening to me. And then Brendan also was a central figure, and what I'll be forever grateful for in really helping to form Switch for Good back in 2018 when we said we're going to put this crazy ad on the closing ceremonies of Olympic Games. I only knew two plant-based athletes from the USA, and I was like, we can't put on a commercial with two people. Like, we need 6 or 7. I called him. I was like, oh my gosh, who do you know? He just came straight down to the studio and was like, I'm here. And he introduced me to Caroline Romero, the plant-based soccer player. She's been on many World Cups team for Team Canada, and then also Malachi Davis, who was a runner for Great Britain. And just because of the power of Brendan Brazier, they just marched straight into the studio too, and were like, we're here, we're ready, let's go. So I'm forever appreciative of all of his work and this. And let's talk to him.
Yeah, because I am actually very appreciative, because I'm a huge fan of Vega. His, especially his bars are too good. I can't eat them because they're too good. I would eat
eat too many.
Oh, they're so
I'm
good.
sure you'd be fine if you ate too many. It's all right.
I'm sure I would be fine. But his protein powder is a staple, and I think, and really, it's so wonderful because it was a plant-based protein powder that went into stores all over and became more. It kicked the myth that a plant-based something that didn't have whey in it would just taste like too hippy dippy. No, he makes an amazing plant-based, all sorts of protein powders and supplements.
Yes. So like I said, the OG. Welcome, OG. How are you?
Thanks, Dotsy. That's quite the intro. I'm well, thank you.
So, if we can go back to, I was going to say the Thrive days, but we're still in the Thrive days. But back to when you first put all this together, started making the connections yourself. I'm sure doing some reading and research, but also you were experiencing it yourself. You were trying to become a better triathlete, and who could perform at your peak. What was the instigator for you? What was that moment, if there was a single moment or many moments?
Yeah, it was really me running track in high school, and I just enjoyed it. And I thought if I could do that full time as a profession, that would be ideal. So started looking at what the top runners in the world did as far as training, and trained really hard, but never made the sort of progress that I felt I would need if I was to be a professional runner. And then realized that, that's really hard to be a professional runner, and triathlon is a little easier in that sense. So I started swimming, biking, and running, and packed it all together, and realized pretty quick that it was very much based on recovery. Obviously, if you can recover more quickly, you can train again sooner, and you improve at a faster rate, and then you increase your odds of being a professional triathlete. So that's what got me into it, was really just career aspiration of being a triathlete. Just because I really enjoyed swimming, biking, running. I'm not by nature a competitive person. I just enjoy doing those things. I like being outside. Like I said, I grew up in Vancouver, and beautiful place to swim, bike, and run. So it was really just wanting to do that and making that connection that recovery was key. If I could recover more quickly, I could increase my odds of having that career.
In your teens, you were experimenting with this edge, trying to get an edge as an athlete, and you experimented with diet, and you tried a lot of different ways of eating, but you settled on a plant-based diet. Why did you settle on a plant-based diet ultimately?
Well, it interested me because when I did try, as you said, I did try several diets, and I think some people, when I say diet, they think, like restrictive, and it wasn't like that. It was just a different way of eating. But when I tried completely plant-based, even though I did it wrong, I became a starchitarian, basically not a vegetarian. Like the mistake a lot of people make, just load up on carbs and don't really eat a lot of nutrition. I was hungry a lot of the time, didn't feel great, but there was still something there. I felt a lightness and I felt a clarity, even though I wasn't doing it right. And then as I started experimenting with it more, I felt better and better, and the inflammation went down. Like inflammation, I didn't even realize I had. And I think a lot of people who have inflammation don't realize they have it. They just, make a fist and it shouldn't feel all puffy. It should, everything should feel good. And then obviously as inflammation goes down, range of motion goes up. So you reduce your risk of injury, you're not inflamed. So I notice these little things. And because, as athletes, you understand, of course, that anything you do differently, you notice right away. You're very sensitive to it. And I kept a training journal and nutrition log that were very tight. So if there's any change in performance, I could look at exactly what I'd been eating. And yeah, I became very meticulous about it. And that's really how it started, was me just kind of getting that initial encouragement through performance when I started eating more plant-based, and then, like I say, dug into it more and just improved upon it over the years.
So you went from more of what would be considered a junk food or vegan to more whole foods and eating more vegetables and fruits and whole grains?
Definitely more based in refined carbs, lots of pasta, things like that. Just that was kind of typical stuff. Didn't really have a lot of complete protein, vitamin B12, iron, calcium, omega-3 fats, these different types of things that, of course, you need. And they're not hard to find, but when you're an athlete and you're just trying to, and you're 15, you don't really know much, you're eating all this pasta, and, it's just sort of it's like, well, I don't eat, meat or dairy now, so I guess, I don't know, I eat potatoes and pasta and stuff. That's sort of, my thinking at the time. But then I started blending all these different foods together that did have omega-3 and iron and calcium and complete protein, and just had this blender drink that I drank for years, just different seeds and nuts and things blended up, and it didn't taste great, but it was functional, it did work, and eventually that evolved and became what is now Vega. Yeah, just get as much nutrition as I could in an easily digestible form.
And what was the atmosphere like back then in terms of like the athletic atmosphere in relation to high performance and its relation to food and what we put in our bodies? Was it something that people were I even remember back when I started, it was almost like, even inside the USOC, it wasn't like a conversation really. I mean, there were nutritionists that were available if you had a problem, but
Right.
Other than that, it wasn't talked about as a performance enhancement tool.
Oh, for sure. No, same with me. Yeah, it was exactly that. If you had a problem, then you could look at nutrition, but it certainly wasn't looked at as a way to boost performance. And, my coach in high school, a track coach, very good coach, he coached some of the top endurance athletes, top runners in Canada. And yeah, because my coach was really good, he'd had a lot of success, but he was very much stuck in his ways. He didn't have curiosity of looking at different things that might boost performance. He had a program and it worked. But because it worked, like I say, he wasn't really interested in experimenting with diet or, anything new really, which, interested me because I thought, well, if this really good coach isn't looking at nutrition as a way to boost performance, I bet a lot of other good ones aren't either. Therefore, athletes are not even considering it. Then maybe there's performance to be gained there. And it just seemed logical. So yeah, I was happy to investigate. And of course, back then, this was like pre-internet access. So, it was hard. You had to go to the library and find books and just gather information wherever you could and sort of piece things together. But then there's some logic in it too, of course. And it's just simple stuff, really, like just eat lots of vegetables and, things just kind of sort themselves out.
Did you feel a difference between being vegetarian and vegan after taking out the dairy?
I did, yeah. Actually, that was one of the big things I noticed because, of course, it's really common for one of the things people hold on to is cheese, and that was like me as well. Like it's just calories, right? And when you're training a lot, I ate quite a lot of peanut butter and things like that too, and cheese just because calories. But when I cut that out, yeah, I noticed sinuses cleared up, my breathing was clearer, and I'd never had that. And I'd never been a big dairy person, but when I cut out, even just a few times a week that I was eating cheese, it did make a big difference. Like each morning I would wake up and I would sneeze, and I just thought it was environmental allergies, but I think it was probably the dairy. Like it was just, I wouldn't have connected that, but it was just kind of interesting. I just didn't sneeze each morning when I woke up. So it was kind of interesting.
And so then you're traveling along and you're learning all this and you're applying it and you're making this awesome crazy shake that probably everybody's like, ugh, what is that? Every day for repair. And then how did you decide, or did you meet someone or collaborate where this could be a thing and people need to know about this and we want to be able to share this with them in a form of the whole line of Vega, obviously, but I'm imagining it started with a either meal replacement or protein powder, like the very first product.
It did, yeah. It started with meal replacement, which at the time we called it Vega Complete Whole Food Health Optimizer. And it's now called Vega 1. So
right, a little simpler.
Obvious reasons we changed the name. But I was just, I've been making it for myself for 7 or 8 years, racing full time. I was okay at triathlon. I was good enough to kind of scrape by, doing some professional races and just living very, very lean. It was tough. It was certainly, you just had to make a lot of sacrifices for sure. And it was good, but I was getting to the point now, I was in my late 20s. So it was the point where, I should have probably broken through, more so than I had if I was going to have a really successful career at this. And then, I was open to other opportunities. And it was interesting because I was listening to the radio one day and this guy was just talking about a new company that started importing maca. And I'd never heard of this. And he was talking about the Peruvian root vegetable, and it was the first importer into North America at this point. And he was talking about gaining weight even though you're exercising a huge amount, or having sugar starch cravings later at night, not sleeping deeply. So when you wake up, you crave caffeine and sugar because your body's tired. And all these things kind of made sense. I thought, well, I have this. And he was talking then about cortisol and the stress hormone, and stress is stress. Doesn't matter if it comes from overtraining or work-related, family-related. So cortisol, stress hormone goes up, and then those things happen. You don't sleep. You don't get that deep phase of sleep. Crave sugar. You can gain weight even though you're exercising. All these things. So I thought it was very interesting. So I got some of this maca, added it to my blender drink, and within about 6 weeks, it worked. It wasn't instant, but again, it was about, as I realized, treating the cause of the symptom, treating the cause of the problem, not the symptom. Burned out adrenals, not sleeping deeply. So I like the holistic approach to this, and it really made a lot of sense to me. And when I put it in my blender drink and gave it some time, it really made a big difference for me. So I actually contacted the person I heard talking on the radio about his new company, and turned out he lived very close to me. He invited me over. We went and hung out, became friends, and from literally day one that we met, we probably hung out 6 hours and talked about collaborating right then and there. Doing my blender drink formula and adding the maca that he had just started importing and combining that and doing that. And about a year later, we brought out Vega. So that's how that started.
That is super cool.
And now you have a full line of many, many protein powders and meal supplements and bars, and you've sold the company. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, we're in year 16 now. It seems strange to me. Where did those 16 years go? But we started off with one product, the meal replacement, which was, at the time it was very different because it was made up of hemp, pea, and rice protein, and the only thing around then was whey protein or soy protein. And so there was no demand for it. And, like this was new to us. Like it was, and I wasn't a business person, and I, wasn't looking for like a hole in a market and, saw a business opportunity. Not at all. It was for me, I just felt that this was the best thing and it helped me a lot. And, Charles, my partner with this, he's a smart business guy for sure, but he said, look, there's no demand for this. Like if there's no demand, how are we supposed to sell this? Like no one knows about this. I believe you that pea, hemp, and rice protein and all these things you're talking about. I believe that, I was just adamant that I didn't care if there's demand or not. I was like, this is the way to go. This is what we got to do. And he said, okay, fine. Then we're going to have to try and create demand, which means, you're going to need to write a book. You're going to have to go around and talk at Whole Foods to like what could be an audience of 4 or 5 people. And that was actually probably about a medium-sized audience. I've had fewer people than that come to my talks, but it was just one of those things where you just sort of go and do it. And, it took a long time to really get going. Like I say, we're in year 16 now. It was year 11 that we sold the company. So it had started growing by then. It was probably year 5 or 6 where things really started to go, but it took a while. So we sold it to White Wave, which also, they own, Silk as well, so soy milk, almond milk, rice milk. White Wave was acquired by Danone, a French company that is now, their U.S. headquarters is in White Plains, New York, but they're great because they're so big. So they have this huge distribution, volume has gone up. Of course, then cost comes down, and there's always good and bad of partnering with big companies. But our goal at a certain point became, let's get more good plant-based food at a lower cost to more people. So it's in Costco now, it's in Walmart, it's in Target, which is great. It's just more people have access to what is now lower cost. It was $75 at first for a tub that was 15 servings, and now it's $45 or even less for, over 30 servings. So that's progress. As I see it, anyways.
Yeah, and that can compete with the whey market. And now there's a demand, for sure. And how do you feel now? Do you, you're such a humble dude, but even when I walk into Whole Foods and see Vega taking over, like 5 of the main top shelves and all the products, and it spans many feet across. It's a huge footprint of distribution that you have now. How does it make you feel?
Well, it's like I say, it's been a while now, so it's not, it certainly doesn't feel like an overnight thing. And I mean, it's great because the world has changed a lot in the last 16 years, as you well know. And, I think even just the last 2 or 3, and even just the last, few months, it's changed a lot, right? So it's just great to see people are more conscious of what they eat. They, in a new generation, they want transparency. They ask questions. They want to know where the food came from. They want to know how it was produced, and they care the impact environmentally. They care about the impact on animals, and they care about the impact on their health and how it's going to affect them in the future. And those are all great things. And those are huge societal shifts that, back in my day, like when I started making this, for me, it was very selfish. I wasn't thinking about the environment. I wasn't thinking about even my long-term health. I wasn't even, right from the beginning, wasn't thinking about the animals. It's like, how can I, perform better and feel better? So it was a very selfish thing. But then, of course, you realize too that there's a lot more to it than that. And that's sort of motivating as well. And just another reason to do it.
I was just going to ask what that shift was like for you when you became eyes wide open to how much good you were doing for the rest of the world, not just yourself. How did you kind of uncover that?
Oh, well, thank you. Being exposed to, the environmental aspects of eating plant-based as well, and how important that was, and how, and then food too. Like my second book, actually, the first third of that book I dedicated to, and it was actually a really kind of like my editor just wanted a recipe book, but I was really adamant because I'd gotten really into the environmental aspects of food production. I just couldn't believe at how inefficient it was to produce food the way people were producing it, through meat. It just made no sense. Obviously, you need all this land, water, fossil fuel. And then I came up with something I call the nutrient to resource ratio. So you look at the amount of land, water, and fossil fuel and CO2 emissions created, so the resources, and then you look at the nutrition, the vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, antioxidants. You can't get a good nutrient to resource ratio through animal food. It's just so inefficient. So I started looking at it that way, and then, like I say, that was sort of the theme of a good chunk of my second book. That I just loved writing that book. It was just the research I did and the things I found were fascinating to me, and the efficiencies that can be gained, and therefore solving huge problems. Obviously, environmental as well as human health problems are kind of the same solution, just eating more plants.
Yeah.
So you have the Thrive brand. You also had a magazine called Thrive, which is now called Alive. But the Thrive brand of helping people switch over to a plant-based diet. And I wondered, what's your food philosophy? Because I've read that last year you were a mostly raw vegan, but what do you eat yourself?
Yeah, I eat largely raw. It's been a few years now that I've done that. I definitely eat more cooked food now than I did a few years back, but very simple. Personally, I like really simple food. I like that, and you know how it is when you eat more simple, just good fresh food, your palate changes and it recalibrates, and you just appreciate subtleties of flavors that you would never get if you ate a standard American diet, because everything's so over flavored. But just eating different types of lettuce, you notice all these different flavors that I like sprouted bread a lot. Sprouted bread, avocado, some tofu, lots of greens, mostly arugula. I just like a lot of arugula, rice, quinoa, buckwheat, a lot of roast vegetables, steamed vegetables, different nuts and seeds, hemp seeds I like a lot. And I haven't followed a recipe in so long. I just make whatever. And I graze too. I'm not a big meal eater. I just kind of graze throughout the day, and I find just helps my energy be more steady. And of course, at tech companies, they do this too now. Google, I think, is the one that really kind of got this way of doing things well accepted. But they have their cafes there, and we actually do this at the Vega office now too. Is then people graze throughout the day, and they don't go back to their cubicle after having a big meal at noon, and 2 or 3 in the afternoon, they get that crash because you eat a lot of food. It takes a lot of energy to digest and assimilate. When you're spending energy on that, you've got all this blood in your stomach. It's not in your brain. You're not thinking. And of course, the countries that have the biggest meals for lunch also have siestas. It's tiring digesting all that food. So if you can eat food that digests more easily, obviously things with probiotics and so on, but kind of spacing it out throughout the day, I find I'm able to think more clearly, work better, train better. But I know some people like their standard meals too, and that's fine, but we're all a little different.
I'm more of a grazer. I'm a grazer.
Yeah, I'm both. I just eat kind of a lot. I have a huge appetite, and it's never gone away. And I was like, I'm going to blow up because I have the same appetite as when I was competing, at a high level. And but I'm on a plant-based diet. I don't know. It's just like it's amazing. In your book, you talk, I remember distinctly, and this is one of the things that really set in with me. You talked a lot about stress and stress reduction, generally speaking, but specifically, for athletes, because we're stressing ourselves in training. So how can how can we reduce that stress through nutrition? So what are some of your thoughts, and what's your philosophy around stress reduction via nutrition?
Yeah, and that's one of the things I try to do in the book, is really help people understand that even though mentally exercise is stress relieving for most of us, us who enjoy it for sure,
right,
still physically you are breaking down muscle tissue, and it is still a physical stress. Your body has to rebuild and repair. So yeah, the idea is to reduce types of stress that are not going to give you a return. I'm trying to reduce stresses that I call uncomplimentary, that just there's not a return. Like worrying about things you don't have any control over, psychological stress, just, there some personality types are just more prone to stress. And if you perceive it as stress, then it is stress. Like, it doesn't even have to be real. It can just that effect on your cortisol and your hormonal system. So nutrition, one thing, eating high net gain food. So I talk about that in the book too. And that's really choosing to eat foods that take less digestive energy. So digestion is a form of stress. It's work. Any output your body does is a form of stress. So easier foods to digest that return more nutrition. So, for example, I started swapping out a lot of pasta and foods that didn't have as much nutritional value for things like sprouted amaranth, quinoa, buckwheat, wild rice. Those are all grains at all, so they will sprout. So you can digest them very easily, and they actually have a lot of nutrition. So that was kind of one of the pillars of my first book. And there are several, but one, eating high net gain nutrition. So less energy out, more nutrition in. So you're going to have a higher return on the food. And then, another one was hormonal. Just taking care of your adrenals with things like maca, for example, and then just understanding where stress comes from and knowing what you can eliminate and what you don't want to eliminate. And the sort of typical thing, someone will be showing all the symptoms of stress and go to his or her doctor, and the doctor will say, hey, well, your stress level is too high. You got to cut back the amount of work you're doing and just relax more. And you don't really want to hear that. If you're someone who's pretty ambitious, you get a benefit. It's like training. There's a return on work. You get stuff done, and it's good. You don't want to go away from that. What you want to do is eliminate the uncomplimentary ones. Like I say, poor nutrition is a huge uncomplimentary stress. There's no return to making bad food choices, and there's no return to, like I say, psychological stress as well. So just thinking of it that way, I found really helpful to me to know where my energy should be spent, where I'm going to get the return, and where I'm not getting a return, so I can eliminate that. So it was really just a shift in mindset and conceptualizing stress in general.
I think so many people don't recognize how much of a driver our hormonal system is. Will you go a little bit deeper into adrenals? Because it was pretty just flabbergasting to me as an athlete, understanding the role that they play and how we can keep them healthy with food.
Yeah, so adrenal for sure, and athletes too, because when you get excited, or you're about to do a really hard workout, you get that adrenaline rush, and that's good because it primes you, and you're going to be able to perform better now than you would have had you not had that. So that's good. That's a natural system. Where it can get us into trouble is when it's sort of overreactive, and you get your adrenaline going over small things that are not, it's a primal thing that goes back to giving us this extra energy when we needed it, when we felt stress. But now you're just walking down the street, and there's sirens, and there's pollution, and there are all these things that actually do cause us to have cortisol go up and stress hormones. So when it really doesn't need to, just an overactive adrenal system through overstimulation is, eventually you got to pay that back. And like I said before, drinking coffee, for example, you get energy and it works. Like, it's completely proven that obviously it can boost athletic performance, but it comes at a cost. You got to pay it back eventually. And, it's kind of like shopping with a credit card. You get it now, but you pay later. And if you don't have good adrenal health and good adrenal strength, it'll be that vicious cycle just to keep level, and then 3 and then 4. So it's just borrowing all the time, that a lot of people are in that cycle.
What about sleep? The advice nowadays is to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep. But in your book, Thrive Fitness, you talk about getting not so much more sleep, but better sleep. How do people do that? A lot of people struggle with sleeping well and sleeping long.
Yeah, absolutely. And so so quality over quantity for sure in sleep. And how do you do that? Well, lowering cortisol is the big one. So again, managing stress. So if cortisol is high, you can't get into the deep phase of sleep called delta. So if you can't get into that, you're sleeping inefficiently, and your body's not rebuilding and repairing as quickly as it should be. So obviously easier said than done, but again, it's going through that checklist of stress, like what causes stress in your life. And it could be overtraining, like it could simply just be overtraining, but more likely than not, it's a combination of, like you say, worrying about things you don't have control over, whether it's work, family, whatever, or just bad nutrition. That's such a big part of it. If you don't have the nutrition you need, that's perceived as stress. So you can eat a lot of food. And as we know, I mean, food is no longer synonymous with nutrition. You can eat huge amounts. You can eat white bread all day long. Your stomach will physically be full, but that chemical signal in your brain telling you need nutrition is going to remain active. So you're going to stay hungry. And that's the number one reason for obesity in North America. It's simple overconsumption, but it's because we eat foods that are lacking in nutrition. Therefore, that signal stays active, telling us we got to keep eating until we got the nutrients we need. The more we ate, the better nourished we became. It was just food and nutrition went together. And now with all the, the low quality foods in the food system, that's not always the case. So making sure you eat nutrient dense foods, having a big leafy green salad every day, having a nutrient dense smoothie, eating more vegetables, simple stuff that is going to get you the nutrition you need. Therefore, it will lower cortisol just naturally. And then you'll sleep more deeply and you won't need as much sleep.
Are there, for somebody that's listening to this, that's like, oh, I am so on the edge right now. Like I'm so stressed. I'm so overwhelmed. So probably limiting, right? Caffeine and alcohol would be things to take away. Do you have, what would be like the 5 power foods that would support adrenals and, healthy cortisol levels? Like what would be like the 5 power punch foods that you would say, put these in, people?
Leafy greens. Definitely. Like leafy greens are mineral rich, especially ones like arugula I was talking about, and anything dark like that is going to be great. Minerals are huge. A lot of people lack minerals, definitely. So yeah, the leafy greens, the maca, different sea vegetables as well, seaweed. Things like chlorella, spirulina can be really good too. So very, very chlorophyll rich, nutrient dense foods. And then again, making that shift from the refined, harder to digest foods over to things like I was talking about, sprouted quinoa, buckwheat, amaranth. And now they have great bean pasta and stuff as well that, when I started off doing this, it just wasn't a thing. So that's good too.
You've spent the last 16 years supporting people getting rid of whey and different animal foods in their diet. When people come to you and say, I really want to become vegan or I want to cut down on animal products, what steps do you recommend that they take first, like the first couple steps in terms of moving their diet over to a healthier, whole food, plant-based diet?
Depending where they're at, but usually what I find works best, especially if people are older and maybe eating a certain way for quite a period of time and are very set in it, I'll often suggest just adding in the beginning, like just adding some good foods that they enjoy, but that are also healthy. And you can always find those, even if it's a smoothie, just have a good nutrient-dense smoothie in the morning. And because it's so nutrient-dense, the person will find that he or she just doesn't get hungry as often and just doesn't crave these foods. So before you know it, they're just not even craving more food. They're full, really, that we were talking about before, because then you never feel deprived. You don't feel as though it's restrictive. You just eat whatever you want, but what you want to eat just happens to be really good for you. And that's the ultimate place, right? You never want to be, you never want to feel as though you're deprived and you're not eating what you want to eat. And I think a lot of people, when they set out on this, is they're worried that's going to happen, that they're not going to have any enjoyment. But as you know, it shifts, it changes over time. That's a great place to be, because you don't want to be, living life feeling as though you're missing out, and it's feeling as though you have to apply your willpower, multiple times a day just to eat stuff you don't want to eat and not eat what you do want to eat, and those types of things. So I think giving them that confidence too, that it will shift. It's just starting, but start off by adding some good foods.
So the palate shifting will be a benefit that they won't have foreseen, but that really helps in the transition.
Big bonus, yeah. Well, speaking of palate and what people like to eat and crave, and foods that have come out in the last couple of years that have are allowing us to have, people that are making the transition, allowing to have a similar experience as they were having before. I remember seeing a picture of you front and center with a huge smile on your face at the Beyond Meat IPO in New York. How are you feeling celebrating that pivotal moment in history, given that, given that you're the OG? I mean, let's just say that. So, I mean, there had to have been a fair amount of emotions happening in that moment, the first plant-based food company to be on the public stock market.
Yeah, no, that was a really great day and just point in the movement, really. I remember the early days there too, and Ethan and I worked closely on actually the first burger that Beyond Meat made called the Beast Burger. It was just for athletes, really. It had more iron and 15% more protein and some omega-3s and so on, and then it shifted to more mainstream, of course, which that's, as it should. That's where the change is going to come, is when it's something that everyone loves and tastes amazing. So Ethan's persistence that it's got to be sold in the meat case. It can't be sold where veggie burgers are sold, and just sticking to that, shifted everything. Because, and it was funny too, people just didn't get it. They say, well, vegans don't shop in the meat case. It's like, well, yeah, this is not for vegans. Right. Like, it's not trying to sell food to vegans, trying to sell food to everyone else. So, just him being so principle driven and mission driven too is what made that work. And the reason for starting the company was not just to sell stuff. It's to, change the way food is looked at and consumed. So, that was a great validation to be part of that and see that happen and see it continue too. Today, of course, it's grown and grown considerably. And people, most people I know who I thought would never even try something like that. Now they love it, and they eat it over meat most times too. And at the very least, they'll, swap out meat several times a week for it. So, they may not be vegan, but while they're eating Beyond Meat products, they are at least. So, it's obviously made a huge change, and that's the whole point.
Tell us a little bit about your role in the Game Changers, because I don't think people realize that you're behind everything that's happened in this movement. I mean, nobody knows that, or many people don't know that story about the Beast Burger. I met James Wilk because of you. You said you guys go have lunch and whatever, and it was and lovely and an honor to be a part of that film. But you were a part of it from the very beginnings of the conversations. And what was your, as just speaking from your truth and your heart, what was your hope that this film would deliver on to the world?
Well, yeah, it's, James, it was probably 7-8 years ago. I remember he contacted me and came over to my house in Topanga, and it was just him, brought his light kit, brought his camera, like little camera, and we did an interview, and because he said he was making this film. And my hope was exactly what has happened. I mean, I couldn't have imagined it being played out any better. And, having you involved too, you're such a great addition to it. And, footage of you, all the cycling and your interview and stuff, it's, it's amazing. And it just became such a great part of the film. So I don't think any of us could have predicted back then, for sure, just the way the world had started to go. And then, films like The Game Changers, pushing it ahead even more quickly in that direction. Google searches for plant-based when, the day that Game Changers came out on Netflix, and it was like some ridiculous spike. I remember looking at that and thinking, wow, that's really cool. Mm-hmm. So, just so happy to see how many people got involved and how many people love the film and what an impact it's had. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you hear this all the time, but people will watch it who have watched so many other plant-based type films and had no effect on them, but they just love this. It was so well shot and it's entertaining, and just really, really pleased to see how everyone brought that film together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, it had a different angle than all the other films in that it talked about what Dotsie was talking about, what you've been talking about from day one, is that a plant-based diet improves athletic performance. It also touched on sexual performance. So it really hit a demographic that had been wary of going plant-based. They felt maybe it was too sissy or something to have a salad. And you and Dotsie have both been breaking those myths just in the way that you both live. What are you doing now? What are your next projects? You've invested in a bunch of plant-based companies, and we'd like to hear about what you're doing now and into the future.
Yeah, well, actually, the most recent thing, actually, kind of similar story to Vega. I discovered this product on the shelf a while ago. Now it's been about 2 years ago, but basically, it's just fermented apple juice. And one ingredient was just apples that had fermented. So therefore, during fermentation, all the sugar goes away, and probiotics and alcohol become the byproduct. This is just apples. I'm curious. I want to try this. So I tried it, and it was amazing. I felt great. It helped with digestion, great clarity, certainly no hangover. Went to the gym later that day. Really good. So I just reached out to the founder of the company. His name's Mark McTavish, and also a Canadian living in Los Angeles. So we met up, and he knew of me from Vega. He had been drinking Vega for a while, so we became friends very quickly, and then business partners. And so now we're making we call it hard pressed juice. So it's called Pulp Culture, and we blend basically fermented juices that have zero sugar because all the sugar has been fermented out with botanical adaptogens, and now it's just basically a healthy alcohol that we make downtown Los Angeles, and you're welcome to come in anytime.
You went from an apple cider type product to actually this is an alcoholic beverage with health benefits.
It is, yeah. So it is technically classified as a cider, so like a sour cider, so completely dry, like I say, zero sugar. Where kombucha, is like low sugar, but this is absolutely zero, and 6 billion CFUs of probiotics, and then the botanical adaptogens like reishi, lion's mane, there's ginger and turmeric, a bunch of different things. So, I've learned a ton about fermentation, and we make it in these huge tanks. We just have the juice come in fresh, and it just sits there for 3 months, and it's just ambient bacteria, wild fermentation. It just sits. So it's kind of cool. Yeah, Mark knows so much, and he's a great partner, and so we make that. The website is pulpculture.la, and you can get it any Whole Foods in California.
So how many other fruits are you fermenting then? So you started with the apples. What else?
Yeah, so apples are the base to everything.
Okay.
And then we'll add in, there are other ones like there's one that we add blueberries, another strawberries. And the interesting thing too is they don't taste like you read blueberry on the ingredient list and you think it's going to be blueberry. It doesn't taste like that because when you ferment something, it tastes different, right? Like wine doesn't taste like grapes,
right? And
it tastes like things that aren't in it, like freshly cut grass or like all these different notes you get.
Smoky.
And so that's what you get with this too. So there's all these flavors that you just wouldn't expect, and that's just through fermentation. So yeah, I'm really having fun with that, enjoying that. Beer, for example, of course, you have to grow, wheat and barley and so on. So you have to irrigate these crops that have very short roots. Whereas apples being the base, from trees, of course, they have deep roots, and it goes into groundwater and need very little, if any, irrigation, and there's no water added. So it's very, very efficient to produce, very, very little water needed, zero waste. So yeah, it's just something that like I say, it's kind of new to me. I'm kind of learning and having fun with that.
That sounds
that
great.
Is so
sounds
exciting.
like
I'm going to get some tonight. Gosh, this was awesome. I learned stuff too. I love that. Thank you. This was excellent. And enjoy your time in Vancouver, and then come back to LA and let's hang out when we can all hang out again.
Definitely. Yeah, it'll be great.
Appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks. You too. Bye.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.